The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André, your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another fun-filled show. Today's guest is Mark McKenna, a artist, celebrated inker who's done work for DC and Marvel and lots of other great projects. Very cool guy with a lot of great stories to tell. We have a great conversation, and I was super happy to get him on the show, as he has inked many of the books from my childhood, and many of the books likely from yours, and does some truly amazing work. But before we get into that, every once in a while I feel as though someone who consumes artistic endeavors, as I do with film and book and novel and all that sort of good stuff, that sometimes it's great to share the things that I'm watching, that I'm loving, that you may not have heard of. So there's a show that was introduced to me by Paul Giamatti, because he executive produced it, on a podcast I listened to. They've talked about it several times, and I've never seen it before. But it's talked about so much, I thought, I got to check this out. It seems like something I'd really like, and I freaking do. It's called Lodge 49. I know it got canceled at the end of season 2. I'm hoping that it had somewhat of a satisfying conclusion since it was canceled. But it sort of follows a group of people that belong to, a Masons-type secret society called the Lynxes. And it's super interesting. It's got Wyatt Russell, the son of Kurt Russell, in it. He's fantastic. Little guest stars. Giamatti does a guest voice star on it from time to time. And there's another person who we haven't met yet, but I've heard his voice on the phone. I'm pretty sure it's Bruce Campbell. Not sure yet, but it sounded an awful lot like him. That's for sure. It's a really great show. Like, I really can't describe why, but it's so good. Like, just the stories, the acting, very watchable. You just kind of breeze through it, and man, it's good. Very good. So check it out, Lodge 49. Anyway, it's been a long week, a lot of stuff going on, catching up on work, all that good stuff. And because of that, I'm not going to give you a much longer intro than just me proselytizing that you should watch Lodge 49, which you should watch Lodge 49. And also, check out that podcast that Paul Giamatti does as well. It's called Chinwag. It's great. I love it. Him and philosopher Stephen Asma, professor of philosophy, do it together, and they kind of talk about weird, occult, supernatural stuff, of which Lodge 49 has a toe dipped into for sure. It's a very cool show. And check out that podcast. Check out mine. Keep listening. Keep tuning in. Check out X-Rated, the X-Men Anime Review Show, the other show that I do with Davin. And it's a blast. Check that out too. Check it all out. Check it all out. But why not check out my new episode right now with Mark McKenna.
You got me?
Hey, there we go.
You hear me?
Yep.
Cool. I don't know what was going on.
That's all good.
Tech stuff, man, it just wrecked me.
You find it hard keeping up with the growing technology?
Yeah, and then, some people were using Google Meet, some people were using Zoom, then there was another thing, and everybody's got their own comfort level, except for me.
It's funny, even at my age, I still find it like I just turned 39, and I still find somewhat like new stuff as it comes along. There's an old man in me that's already starting to be like, push back, and then the young me's like, no, I gotta like quell it. A friend of mine just got a Tesla yesterday, and he went to go pick it up. And he took me with him and so he drove it back, and I remember looking at all the crazy stuff in it and just being like, why do we need this? And then I'm like,
yeah. I bought a new Honda CRV.
Nice.
Yeah, and guy says, you want electric? I'm like, I'm not there yet.
I mean, I think I'm there. Like, honestly, I just did the. I know out here, where are you at again?
New Jersey,
New
Central
Jersey.
Jersey.
Oh, you're not too far away. I know in the States it's becoming a thing with heat pumps and solar panels and all that.
Yeah.
So we did the solar panel, the heat pump thing in our home, where I live, and it's going great. So like the kind of idea of like, the solar panels are kind of paying my electric bill. So if I have an electric car, then I'm not paying for gas really, because the solar panels are covering that too. So
Yeah.
I see it's very appealing in a financial sense. Um,
Totally
I
get it.
I'm also not a huge Elon Musk fan, but I mean the Teslas are like, as far as the product itself goes, they're really great. So it's like,
Yeah. No,
you know,
I hear you. Everyone teach their own. I'm not boisterous about any of that stuff. Yeah. So, cool jacket or shirt you're wearing
oh,
there?
sure. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks. It's
Is that somebody that we should know?
no, just I got one of those Target. I buy a lot of like printed shirts. It's kind of my like style, I guess. So
Mhm.
like Hawaiian type shirts in the summer, and then usually there's a lot of flannel in the winter. But because of that, I think I get occasionally targeted ads for these sites that are like, "Hey, you wear weird shirts, and you like this one." And this one popped up, and I was like, "I really love Halloween," and I was like, "Well, yeah, okay." So I got this one and another one that kind of very put me in the Halloweeny spirit.
Yeah, I'm a big horror movies used to scare the bejesus out of me when I was a kid. I think my
Really?
dad took me to a Hammer horror movie when I was 6 years old, and the guy had a big
Oh,
zipper scar on his head, and
yeah, you got a
he was
cool
going,
dad.
"Woo!" And I was shrinking in my seat. My dad was supposed to be taking me to Abbott and Costello and meet Frankenstein. It wasn't playing, so he takes me to the Curse of Frankenstein, and couldn't sleep for weeks.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Your dad's like a cool guy.
yeah, he was, but he was also, a Marine for 8 years, so
Oh,
he was a badass.
did you guys travel around a lot because of that?
Uh, did he travel?
Or did you guys? I guess Marines
Oh
are
no,
different
no, we
than.
weren't. We weren't brats, Army
Oh,
brats
okay.
or anything like that. He did his 8 years. Met my mom in a business, in a stock market business in New York City, and a few years later, I came. I was the oldest. I'm the oldest of four.
Oh,
And
well.
yeah, my mom. Both my parents are gone now. I'm 67 now, so
Hmm.
um, dad died in 2002, and mom just passed away 2 years ago. So
No.
still just dealing with that. She died the day after my son got married, which is crazy. Uh, she attended the wedding. She came up from Florida, went to the wedding, and the next morning she didn't wake up. It was just nuts.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
honestly, like I wonder about that. I mean, you're obviously close to it than others, but like the prolonged illness versus the just going in your sleep. Like, what's the better way? I mean, at least you get to say goodbye to people, but I don't know. There's this part of me that's always like filled with this existential dread that like I don't know if I want to know what's coming. I'd rather just be surprised, like it be
Yeah.
happen.
No, I don't want to know what's coming either. But she went to bed. We put her on the couch and plopped her up with pillows, and then that was the end of that.
Wow.
But it's a surprise because you don't get to say goodbye.
Yeah,
But
that's the
you think
hardest
it's
part
going
of
to
it.
be better the next morning. Let's change the subject. It's
Oh,
okay.
sure. No, no, I don't want to. I don't want to dwell on
Yeah,
that
I'm
for
not.
sure.
I'm not morose about it. She was 89 years old. She had a good life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's all you could ask for, I guess. But
Yeah.
cool. So you guys grew up like, did you grow up in Jersey or just New York City or?
I'm a Long Island kid. I grew up in Long.
Ah, very nice.
First 7 years I was in Brooklyn, and then I learned to ride a bike in Long Island and graduated Bayport Blue Point High School, way out on the great South Bay, the South Shore of Long Island.
Yeah.
And I got the job at Marvel when I was 26, but I was then when I worked at Marvel in 1985, I was 25 actually, and turned
Oh.
26 when I got the job.
Well, were
Um,
you always as a kid into comics? Like, was that
I
something?
think so. I don't remember how far back it goes. I remember seeing a very early Daredevil comic. My friend was sitting on a Brooklyn corner. It looks like one of those old black and white photos you see, where he's just opening up a Daredevil comic, and I'm fascinated by it. And I'm like probably 6 years old. I had never seen that before. Um, and then I started collecting and started drawing a little bit, and and it just kind of rolled from there. Are we alive
Oh
right
yeah,
now?
yeah, yeah. This is all. This is all.
Oh,
Yep.
we're all cool. Okay, yeah.
Yep. Yep. No worries at all. I should have asked you, I think, if you were okay with it recording when you came in, but it
So
might just been one.
whatever.
Yeah, it's all good. um, yeah. Well, that's really cool. It seems like somebody has some kind of like that one book. It's funny. I often ask people like, "What's the thing that you remember?" And it's always some vague. I remember this one Daredevil comic. I remember this one Legion of Superheroes comic or something to that
Yeah.
effect. Well, it
Yeah,
was
I had an uncle who lived next door to us, my Uncle Tim, and he had a big Scrooge McDuck, Donald Duck collection. But
cool.
when he went superhero, he went Legion of Superheroes,
Yeah.
So I got to read that stuff early on, probably when I was preteen. But he didn't have any Marvel comics. It was
Really?
all the Donald Duck stuff and then the DC stuff. So I got to see the Fat Fury Herbie. I don't know if you remember this
Oh yeah, I
character.
remember that comic. Yeah,
Big
that's
round
one
guy
that.
with the
Yeah, it
lollipop.
was such a surreally weird comic. Like every once in a while, I'll see one at a yard sale, or I might have one like in an old box somewhere, and I was like going through old
Uh-huh.
comics, and I'll read it, and I'll be like, "What a strange!" Like the fact
You're
that this
right.
comic lasted as long as it did.
Yeah, for
Maybe
sure.
it's because of the '70s or the '60s, '70s, and all this sort of counterculturalism, like weird stuff going on. Because you had like a lot of strange books, but that was like a very odd book.
Yeah, no, there was also a group called the Inferior Five.
hmm
Hear them? They had a little girl who was like, I think her name was like Playboy Bunny. She had the bunny ears, and they were just a bunch of nerdy characters. A very comedic thing. I don't know how long that lasts. Look that up
Wow.
when we're done here.
Yeah, sure.
The Inferior Five.
The Inferior Five. That's
I was
another
also a
one.
DC. I believe that was also a DC comic.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
they kind of drudged into some weird waters. So we had this. Yes, you're right. It was from the Freedom Brigade. Yeah, in that universe. That's weird.
Yeah.
Created by Joe Orlando and
Oh,
Nelson Bridwell. Hmm.
I have a Joe Orlando story.
Ooh, well, let's hear it.
Yeah. So when I was on staff in Marvel in '85 and '86, I made an appointment to meet with Joe Orlando at DC. I was at Marvel on 28th and Park Ave.
Mhm.
DC was on 555 Fifth Avenue, so it was about 20 blocks. So on my lunch break, I had made an appointment to see Joe Orlando, and I went up to the office at my lunch, and he was on a prolonged lunch. So I had to get back to the offices. But DC guy let me up in the offices, kind of walking around the rooms there. Clark Kent, the big giant statue of Clark Kent sitting and reading the Daily Planet on a couch, that
That's
kind of stuff.
awesome.
And Joe Orlando is not back from lunch, and I had to get back soon. And I hear some rustling papers in one of the rooms, and I peek in, and it's Karen Berger, who was one of the group editors at DC at the time.
Mhm.
This is late 1986 now. I think I was on my way out of Marvel at this point, trying to figure out the next move.
Mhm.
So I stick my head in and I say, "Hi, Karen. My name is Mark McKenna. I work at Marvel. I was supposed to be with Joe Orlando, but he's running late. Can I leave you these samples?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure." Next day, she calls me up and offers me a contract. I
Wow.
was getting medical benefits, a bonus, and a contract to do Dr. Fate in
Wow.
1987. And I never, still had to this day, I think Joe's gone for a bunch of years. Never met him though. Never met him.
Well, hey, maybe it wouldn't have worked out if you met him.
Yeah,
So.
possibly, right? I would have done a lunchbox design, and that would have been the end of it. But I was on a continuity contract for 4 years on DC at that point. That's
That's
when I
so
worked
cool.
on Doom Patrol and Legion '89, and a book called The Griffin and Dr. Fate.
Mhm.
And I actually broke the contract in '91 because I got a call from Dr. Strange, editor at Marvel, and asked me to bring some of that Doom Patrol energy to Marvel, and I quit my contract and went over to DC, Marvel, and then did Doctor Strange in '91, '92, and then '92 was the big boom when everything sold like a million copies and
Oh
stuff
yeah.
like
That's
that. Yeah.
awesome. Well, that's I'd like to get back to that for sure. I just want to catch you up to when you got into that. Was the career idea always getting into comics? Was that like what you had like as you were drawing them as a kid? Were you thinking this is the career I want, like the when I get older?
So I met with the excuse me, I met with the guidance counselor in high school,
Oh,
and
nice.
the guy's like, "What are you going to do with this?" And I'm like, "Well, I can make Super 8 movies, or I can pursue a comic book career." So I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York City on 23rd and 3rd, and he hooked me up with the film chairman of the film department. The guidance counselor did, and I met with the film department chair, and he said, the chances of me getting a job in film are astronomical, like 10,000 to 1. He's basically trying to see if he can scare me.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a good job. I was like, I'm pass. What's my other option? My plan B is go into comics. So I went to School of Visual Arts. I became Will Eisner, the guy who did The Spirit, back in the 40s.
Oh, I'm very familiar.
He was my teacher.
What? Oh my
Yeah,
God.
isn't that
I talked to
crazy?
somebody else that talked about him being their teacher. I can't remember who it was. But yeah, that's insane. Well, you like
It was insane. Yeah.
how could
Yeah,
you
I love the
focus on
man.
anything? Yeah, like
Yeah, I love the guy. Not as a teacher, but as a
no.
doer. Just being part of his fan club was huge. And then after 3 years of trying animation, I was trying to get in the animation program, but
Mhm.
it was all before computers. So we had to draw 770 drawings for 1 minute of animation,
Oof.
and I was going cuckoo doing that stuff.
Yeah.
So I met with the illustration chair, and he said, you're going to graduate next year. Where are we going with this? And I said, well, I started with the animation and the comics. I got away from the comics. He goes, well, one of our other teachers here teaches perspective, is also the new talent coordinator at DC Comics. His name is Sal Almondola. He hooked me up with a meeting. I went up to DC. This is before I got the regular job
Mhm.
back there. So it started back, earlier, 1982 when I graduated School of Visual Arts, and now you jump, to 1987 when I actually was on on a regular book.
Yeah.
So I met with Sal Amendola, and DC at the time was doing biweekly Friday classes where they were bringing all new talent in, and we do a big circle table, and we'd all share our samples. And he said to me at one point, I got cocky thinking, oh, I'm going to get a job. And he said, you know what? You have what it takes. It's just you're not there yet, So I took that his words to Marvel. When I go from Long Island, because I'm a Long Island kid, I take the Long Island Railroad to DC on Friday, then walk 20 blocks to Marvel and draw my samples I did at DC at Marvel.
Mhm.
And then John Romita Sr. calls me up and offers me a job at Marvel
Wow.
in 1984, and I had to pass because at that time the minimum wage was $4.50 an hour, and I was commuting from 50-something miles from Long Island to New York every day, and there's no way I can make it work financially.
Yeah.
So he called me 3 times over the next year and said, do you want this job? I go, I do, and I explained myself that I can't afford it because of my commute. And then he said to me the third time, he says, what if I can get you assisting other artists? I said, then I would say yes.
Wow.
Then I took the job. I was doing art corrections at Marvel, and I was doing assisting work for Vinnie Coletta, Bob Layton, Al Milgram, Brett Breeding, a bunch of guys. So I really got my hands dirty back then. It was a good time.
How did your the military father take a career in art?
He didn't like it. He didn't think it was going to work out for me. I actually heard him through the wall one time telling my mom, "This is a crazy dream." I don't know that he wanted me to be military, but I also know he was thinking it was a pipe dream. And of course, when I made it, he's like, "I always knew you were going to do it."
I wonder that too. Like, I don't, that's the stereotype, is that the hardworking sort of military father. It's always a surprise when I talk to someone whose parents are super supportive in the art, like of them going into an artistic endeavor. They always seem to, taper off once you have some success.
Yeah,
But the stereotype of the military father is that he just wants you to go in the military. I like that he recognized you're probably not cut for that, but also he probably wanted something a little more stable, I suppose, for you.
Yeah, the year of the draft was the year they discontinued the draft, 1975. So I didn't have to even deal with it. So I was an athletic kind of guy. I might have been okay, but I wasn't where my heart lied at all.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen the movie Born on the 4th of July where Tom Cruise is all rah-rah and he's back.
So he's blown apart. Yeah. Yeah. I read a book a while ago about it's called The Things They Carried, which is kind of a famous book, I guess, about Vietnam, from a guy that was in it. Tim O'Brien, I think, was the writer. Someone had given it to me as a gift, and it was a very interesting read, and also probably one you watch enough movies about it that, like, I wouldn't say desensitize you because it's fucking horrific, but like the idea that, like, you see so much narrative fiction about it, you're like, well, but then when you read like a firsthand account, you kind of like, or just maybe it's the way he told the story, it just really hits home how
Yeah.
horrifying. Like the
Yeah.
day-to-day life of trying to live in that world would have been, and just survive and keep some shred of your humanity while getting through it would have been
Yeah.
nightmare.
Sobering for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, that's
My
like
dad never saw it. Sorry?
no, you go ahead.
My dad just never saw action. He was a staff sergeant, but I think he was down at Fort Dix in the Carolinas or something, but he
Hmm.
never went overseas.
No, well, that's good.
Yeah. Which
Um,
is good. Good.
I always like I'm amazed talking to people that have been into the the studio art system, because like to me art and business are such an interesting combination, and I've had this conversation with others, but like I love the idea that like, people, when it comes to like contracts and getting folks like yourself on, discovering new talent, and because it's got to be tough as artistic people, in my experience, aren't the most organized. So sometimes
Sure.
being someone that has to sort of keep these people together in a
Yeah.
professional environment and make sure they get their stuff in on time, and the editor's
Yeah.
job, I guess, is
Yeah, no, you're right, man. I mean, what if you're a solid performer who makes your deadlines, they make you a rock star,
yeah,
in the business.
really.
Right? Versus those guys that have the amazing style but only do about a page a week, can never make a deadline. I
Mm.
get that for sure.
What was the art correction world like? Is that just like looking at all the art books coming in and then making small changes here and there, or?
Yeah, well, it could be small. It could be like bad storytelling that
Mhm.
they should nip in the bud when it's in the pencil form, but then wait for it to be finished, and then they hand it to us, and we would have to put like if somebody drew two left feet on a character because they're sleeping at the wheel, um, we'd have to put a right foot, but we wouldn't white. We sometimes we would white out the artwork directly on the art, but a lot of times we didn't mess with the art because some rock star did it, and he would have been bitching at us. So we would put what they call correction paper, which was adhesive paper. You peel off the back, you put it over the problem area, and then you ink right over that. You can light box it and then rework it. So when the guy's
Wow.
done, when you're done with it, you can actually peel it back off. So it's suitable for printing, but at the same time, it's not wrecking his stuff.
Wow, that is cool. I don't think I've talked to anybody that's talked about this process before. That's really interesting.
Yeah, we
Um,
did that. I did that for almost 17, 18 months. It was three of us that worked there. It was I was an inker, and then we had a penciler inker, Tom Morgan, who became assistant art director for John Romita Sr.,
mhm.
and then James Fry, who was another penciler. So the three of us it was supposed to be a program that was supposed to be a year max, and then they'd kick you out. But I think there had to be probably close to 40 or 50 guys that did the program over, say, 7 years. Originally, it was planned just to help the next generation of talent become realized. It wasn't just about art corrections. Once I was in the Marvel bullpen in 1985, I was like, get the hell out of here. Jack Kirby walking around and
Yeah.
Stan Lee coming in. It was very surreal.
That do you like when do you ever check in any like story? Because I know they wrote a few books about Stan Lee since he passed away, and obviously his issues with Jack Kirby are kind of well publicized. But do you see much of that? Like looking back on those stories when they come up? Like I read the Stan Lee book, True Believer, which
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was negative, but it certainly wasn't positive about his sort of role in the
I
in
read one of
the.
his books. I read one of the books too. The guy, he slanted towards Jack Kirby, if I remember. Is that the
I think
one?
it was Abraham Riesling. Is that who wrote it? I think.
I'm not,
It's
I have
got
it
a
down.
kind of it's
Red
they
cover?
talk.
Red.
No, a different one.
Okay. Okay.
It's like a black and white
No,
cover with Stanley's face on it.
I think I saw Enough Said is the one I think I saw.
Yes, yeah, I didn't read that one, but yeah.
Yeah.
So did you see much of that, like just as a person working in the office, or is it just sort of
I
a?
didn't see really a lot of it. Well, I do remember one specific story. Hopefully, I can remember it enough to tell you.
Sure.
But when I read the book, one of the things that was a lapse, and I think the guy just filled in the gap
Mm,
versus knowing the real story,
yeah.
was when Todd McFarlane was he had become a rock star on Spider-Man. Excuse me, and he wanted to write his own Spider-Man book. And at the time, I think it was Jim Salicrup was the editor, and he would say, "Show me writing samples." And McFarlane just said, "If I don't get this, I'm going to walk." And they gave him the book. Like everybody was like, "Give him the book, give him the book." He's Todd McFarlane. He's making us millions of dollars. So I think the way that was told is the guy didn't know the story about it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I saw what was going on because I was in the offices 20 feet away from what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy kind of smoothed it over as just as a thing that wasn't the way it went down in my mind at least.
Yeah. That's got to be interesting with the benefit of, because obviously as time chugs along, people are reporting on all these big events in the past, and as being someone that's a part of them, like seeing how these are reported, and then if recall the actual events and seeing what
Right.
the dark difference
Yeah,
between this.
yeah. I mean, when I read the book, it was fresh in my mind, but I read the book a year ago, so it's not as fresh in my mind. But it definitely was a thing at the time.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the
Oh, and then,
idea, sorry, you just mentioned like rock
oh,
star artists a lot. Is that
yeah.
like, were they living like, were they that, like, I know that's how they're viewed as by the fans like myself and other people, but was that like, were they living like a rock star lifestyle amongst,
No,
okay.
no,
Because I remember when McFarlane all them went to Image, they're like all these pictures of them all in leather and they're all like really cool and like they're the bad boys of comics and like
yeah,
doing their own thing. And I wondered how much, because you hear secondhand stories here and there about, people that are bigger names and how they're treated when they go to cons and stuff like that. And you
sure.
kind of wonder how much that transitions into the workplace itself.
Yeah, I remember going to John Workman, who's one of the more famous letterers in the business. He was
Mm-hmm.
doing all that stuff over Walt Simonson's store and stuff,
Mm-hmm. Oh
and
yeah.
he had a pool party in his backyard. He had a 4-foot pool with about 2 feet of water in it. And, he was cleaning up dog poo probably when we were there. And you're thinking you're going to be sitting in this palatial backyard playing volleyball with,
Mm.
2 acres of grass. And it wasn't that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember the name Don Heck.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Don Heck
Yeah.
used to come into an art store after I graduated the School of Visual Arts.
Mm-hmm.
I was working in the art store in Long Island, and Don Heck used to come in, and I didn't know who he was. I just looking for this guy wanted to buy 22 by 20 inch Strathmore drawing board. So I said, "What do you use it for?" He goes, "I'm a comic book artist. Maybe you heard of me?" And he says, "Don Heck." I go, "You're Don Heck?" And then all of a sudden, you could see he was all excited that I knew him. And I go to his house, and and I loved the guy, but his house was a mess, and he was a single man. His dog was, doing whatever the dog wanted to do, and it was so hard. That part is heartbreaking because you're thinking you're gonna live the vida loca, and wasn't.
Yeah, you hear stories about guys, like Dicko, and like he just sort of like the legends about him are just sort of he just had some weird little office somewhere. He didn't really interact with people too much, and he just
Very
sort of
reclusive,
it was pretty much a recluse. And I remember someone had told me, I don't know if it was on the show or just someone that I talked to at a convention or something, had told me that like somebody was working for one of the companies and was dropping something off to him, and he had some papers and one of them fell off the top and he picked it up to give it back to him and it was like a residual check from something and it was like an obscene amount of money on it, that he just like, that he's like, oh yeah, thanks, and like took it back and just went about his day.
It's so casual,
Yeah. He just has checks hanging around full of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I did see him up at Marvel one time.
Oh, really?
When you went up to the 10th floor, the art floor, the 11th floor was the business floor, the suit floor. So we go up the elevator, 10th floor, we get out, and the lady at the front would have to buzz you in, because it was a glass locked door. And one day I walked past the glass door, and Ditko was just sitting there waiting to be let in. Guy should have a key to the city at that point, in my mind. And he's sitting there waiting to be let in. I thought that was crazy,
Wow. Did you have a chance to talk to him?
I did. I was a little scared of the rock star guys back then. I remember seeing Kirby at a show, and I went wide around them. I was like, I didn't know what to say. Also, I grew up reading all that stuff, but he was not one of the guys I wanted to emulate. My guys were different. Brian Boland, who did Judge Dredd, or Jerry Ordway was a guy. I always wanted that beautiful, tight rendering. John Beatty on Captain America, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I grew up reading, Vinnie Coletta inking, Jack, or it just wasn't where Neil Adams is, a monster in the business, but I never took to his art style, So I mean, whoever your gods are is, we'll kind of follow.
I had a discussion with that with someone lately about how I think it was Johnny Christmas, who's a Canadian or American and now Canadian, I think, comic guy. And you talked about how it's interesting when you talk with creators. It seems like a lot of what the people emulate aren't the things that are similar to their style. It's like you always kind of really love the stuff that you can't do, or it's not necessarily your aesthetic.
Right.
But it's always like, some guy that does very clean, crisp things like, oh, I love like Humberto Ramos or like Bill Sienkiewicz or something. And you're like, it's like wildly different than what they're doing, but you're like, well,
Absolutely.
yeah, you're like, oh, well, it's cool. It's good to broaden your horizons. If you just stay in an echo chamber of your own art style, you'll never kind of
Yeah.
grow.
Yeah,
Uh,
and the other thing is, I would only read comics where I enjoyed the art. If I
mm,
couldn't get past the art, I would not even pick the comic up.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Even if it was
artists at
well
heart.
written. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you moved on from the corrections, where was the next step?
That was when DC hired me.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
and
So
then
was
I
that
went,
you were waiting to get like they weren't bringing you up into the full art stuff in Marvel, and that's why you thought they were going to fire you, or?
it was kind of like you had to make your own way.
Hmm.
When I was in the corrections department, we used to call us Romita's Raiders for John Romita Sr.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. We were always Romita's Raiders.
Yeah.
And the business, was kind of like, okay, you're in the offices, now figure it out for yourself. And then I started doing backgrounds for, Al Milgrom, and he would start giving me a little bit more to do. And, but you work with guys that have been in the business for 15, 20, 30 years is where the gold is, and I remember uh, there was a time where there was sort of like an organic inker, Joe Rubenstein, be kind of like a freehand style, and then you get a Bob Layton who would do Iron Man, and he'd rule everything. He'd get perfect templates for the top of the head and the shines. Everything was ruled, and I kind of leaned more that way than the organic style. I tried to do the organic style, which is basically freehand,
Mhm.
kind of freehanding things. And I remember doing a car this way when I was working for Bob Layton, and the editor brought him in his office and said, you gotta get a new background guy. This guy's not cutting it. And his assistant was there, the editor's assistant, and he came over to me and said, Bob Layton just said, I'm gonna cut that guy loose. Basically not going to give me an opportunity to do any more work. And the other guy said, he's not a good guy. Being nice about it.
Yeah.
And and I'd see Bob Layton after that, and he basically cut me off and didn't try to work with me to make me a better guy at the time.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, he just basically said, I'm not calling you anymore. And then it just, so, and that was at a time, was an important a time for me, because it was a time when I didn't know what the next thing was going to be,
Hmm.
and so there was a little bit of haziness there, but, and, I've seen Leighton since then. I just kind of smile and walk away from him, but, that was a long, long time ago. So,
Oh yeah, but still, it's like in any kind of industry, they're going to have that sort of stuff, I guess. It's just unfortunate that, sometimes it happens with people like that.
he talked to me like he was my best friend, and I heard
Yeah,
him shoot me down behind my back,
yeah,
what are you
yeah,
going to do?
yeah. That's a shame. I'd reached out to him once about being in the show, but he never answered. So I doubt that's going to happen. So I can't really get any answers for you. Not that you need them or anything. Um, cool. So what was DC like? Like that transition? Was there much difference in the environment in the office between the two?
Absolutely. DC was very corporate. They didn't have
Mm.
any giant aluminum foil balls rolling down the hallway, or rubber band fights in the middle of the bullpen, or crazy
There's a
stuff.
there was something, I think it was one of the books. I don't know what, something about Stan Lee, and it was something about him and Jack Kirby, and a friend of mine always brought it up because he said like that time period must have been interesting because they talked about it like so Stan Lee like played the flute or something. And like he'd just be
I
in his
didn't know
like Jack Kirby would be like grumbling over his desk trying to like get some deadline made, and because he was such a gruff kind of hard ass sort of dude.
Yeah, yeah.
And then like Stan Lee's like in the office just like playing a flute because like
That's
just
so funny.
that strikes me as like a very Marvel fun thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would have Friday walkthroughs. They bring in tour people, and they have a guy walking around doing stuff.
Oh, okay.
That we were doing important things.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I never I saw Stan, I think, once in the offices the times I were there,
Mm.
but it was always cool. I was
Yeah.
there during Jim Shooter's reign as editor in chief,
Hmm.
And one of the ladies upstairs had put 40 years in, I think, and they had a marching band come through the bullpen.
Oh,
It was crazy, you know. It was
well, that's
my
nice. That's heartwarming.
yeah, no, my wife worked for this woman. In fact, my wife worked at Marvel Comics.
Oh, wow.
She worked in the accounting department and knew how much money I didn't make. Just
And she still married you. Well, that's true love then.
yeah,
I mean, it must be interesting being in that world because, like I'm a graphic designer. I'm an artsy type guy. I do
mhm.
like little comics, nothing that's ever really done much, but just stuff that I enjoy. And my wife's an accountant as well, so it's always funny how there's like this super like hard, like very rigid sort of way of looking at the world that the accountant brings, and then the let's go chase this butterfly artistic partner on the other side,
Yeah,
like.
yeah, you get it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
100%. That's funny. So I guess with a more business oriented leaning at DC, not a lot of fun to be had, I guess, in the office.
No, it was all knocking on the door kind of stuff. You didn't really see the guys walking around the office. Once you got past Clark Kent sitting there reading the Daily Planet on the couch, it was
Mhm.
all business.
Mm,
Whereas Marvel, it looked like a circus half the time.
mm.
Not the business floor, of course, because of suits, but where we were. I mean, Mark Grunwald had a giant aluminum foil. I was not kidding. He had a ball. He took all the gum wrappers and made a giant aluminum foil ball out of it. I would walk in and go, "What the heck?" Things like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a very unforgettable year and a half of my life.
Yeah.
And of course, meeting all these guys, and then the DC thing, just getting hired from DC opened the door for me, and then I would go back and forth between Marvel and DC for years. Every time I was needed a raise, I would go to one and say, what's your rate? I go, well, Marvel just upped me to this, and they upped me to that, and then DC would up me
No.
to this.
So they really
Yeah.
don't care that much about jumping, like going between companies. It's not like a loyalty, you know,
Yeah.
thing because
Right.
they're fine with. I guess you have to be in that world, but they didn't really like. They wouldn't be like, well, you went to Marvel, so you never come back to DC. Like nobody ever
No,
approached it that way.
and that's because it was a continuity contract and not an exclusivity contract.
Right.
That would have made a difference, right? So if they said to me, just make your deadlines, and we're at gold. But also it behooved them to have me both because if I'm working on Doctor Fate and then they want to put me in Doctor Strange and then they go, oh, Doctor Strange, people know Doctor Strange, let's put him on Doom Patrol. And
Mm.
it didn't
Oh,
hurt to
okay.
put
So they
recognizable.
play off it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That makes
definitely.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's super animosity, other than what you would think it might be,
I mean, I think it behooves some people to play up stuff like that to make it seem like there is when there really isn't. I mean, you're
Part of
all
the story.
it's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's just to make it a more interesting narrative or a book or a story or whatever that someone's doing.
Right.
But I mean, it's a business at the end of the day, right? And that's I guess the key point is I mean, they even work together to make those amalgam comics. So at some point, or the Marvel versus DC books. So like at some point, they obviously got along enough to work on that stuff together. So
Right, right,
now
right,
the
right.
billion-dollar movie franchises are part of the mix. I don't know if we're going to see any more of that stuff, unfortunately, but it was a fun little, piece of the world when we had it.
You know, the thing with the movies is Marvel used to. We're talking about Marvel now, right?
Yeah, I mean
But yeah,
DC making big movies too, but
yeah, no, no.
Seems like Marvel has certainly won that one so far.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Yeah.
But Marvel would be the movie people, the studios would come and basically ransack Marvel for whatever they wanted character
Mhm.
wise. But but there was not a give back. They wouldn't say, well, we want to use Brother Voodoo, we'll give you $3 million. They would just say, we're taking Brother Voodoo, bye. And
Mhm.
so there was no. The only thing we hoped for is, in the publishing business was an increase in sales.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and they failed. The only blip on the map from what I remember hearing was when the first Michael Keaton Batman movie came up. There was a noticeable bump in sales in comic books,
Mhm.
but then that stuff didn't follow suit down the road. And then the X-Men movie came out in I think 2011, maybe.
Oh, the first one is like 2001, I think.
Oh, maybe 2003. Oh, I
Yeah.
think that might have been it. I did the Wolverine movie prequel, and you better believe they were going to try to get a Tower Records edition. They did a
Mhm.
Dynamic Forces edition. They did a sketch cover edition.
Mhm.
This book sold 85,000 copies at $5 each,
Mhm.
which, if you think it was a $2 book, it would have been, over 200,000 copies.
Yeah.
So they made sure they hit a home run with that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, it's an interesting world, and now that it doesn't seem like the tail or the the old saying is like the dog or the tail is wagging the dog kind of thing.
Right.
It doesn't seem like it goes. I mean, it does. The comics do seem to reflect whatever the movies are doing, but the movies. It's interesting to me because the movies, and maybe it's because we're preaching to a modern audience, but like almost all of the storylines that they use in all of the new things are from new stories. Like,
Yeah.
the Winter Soldier's not that old of a comic story in the
Correct.
Marvel
Right.
universe. So,
Right. Right.
I guess the Infinity Gauntlet is, but to me, that's like kind of an outlier. It was overlaying everything, but they certainly didn't approach it in the way that story did, like with all the
Right.
cosmic characters and the big space stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so it's
You
like,
enjoy all the you enjoy all the movies?
yeah, yeah. I'm certainly I'm more forgiving than most people, some of my fellow nerds, I guess, when it comes to this stuff, because I'm just happy. I grew up in a time where there was a real desert of like movies or TV shows about comics. So
Yeah.
now that it's everywhere, I'm just sort of happy that I have it. Like the idea I would have saw the Guardians of the Galaxy in a movie, especially three great movies, would have been uh like as a kid, if you told me I would have seen Thanos in a movie, I would have thought you were insane. Like
Yeah.
he was my favorite villain growing up, still is, and Jim Starlin is very high in my list of favorite creators, and
Uh-huh.
so the idea that I'm seeing a She-Hulk show where that's very similar to the John Byrne comic. Like I'm just kind of getting like versions of everything that I love growing up, and it just seems to kind of keep rolling. I know like people have their issues with certain things, but I wouldn't say I don't think I've seen anything from the Marvel universe that I thought was ostensibly terrible. There's stuff I
Yeah.
like better than others, but I've enjoyed the ride so far. And
Yeah.
it's
I'm forgiving too. I would say
yeah.
for the most
You
part.
you have to be, or you'll just be miserable. Like you'll just be a
Yeah.
miserable person. If they're like, it's
Yeah.
not exactly like the comics, you're never going to be happy.
Yeah. No, I also, I don't have the memory I had of this
Hmm.
stuff when I read the stuff 20 or 40, 50 years ago, whatever it was. So I'm still waiting to see Galactus on the big screen though.
I'm very excited for that. The guy that got playing him is it Ralph Ineson or something? He's got a voice. The like he's got a. Do you see the movie The Witch?
I
The
did
one,
see the.
yeah, he was the dad in that, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, so he's got that really deep, gruff. I think he's Irish or something voice. So
Mm.
I'm excited. I'm always been a big Fantastic Four fan. Never really happy with any of the movies. Although I did think the Silver Surfer was well done in that version of the movie, though Galactus wasn't, unfortunately. But the Silver
It was
Surfer
a
was great.
cloud. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like a fart cloud.
It's always weird to me that like I mean studios like there's a weird line with what they don't think is ridiculous but what is okay with being they're like okay well people can buy you know four people with magical powers that can buy a silver guy and a surfboard from space but they can't buy a giant guy in a purple helmet like that's where the line is that's where
Right.
the fantasy ends like I can't
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like it's strange to me these strange lines people choose which is what believable to an audience when you're doing a superhero thing than what isn't.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You throw all reason out the window. Honestly, that
Yeah.
makes no
Well,
sense.
I did want to ask you a bit about because you'd worked on a lot of, as a kid born in '85, a lot of my seminal sort of comic reading was in the early '90s, to mid '90s, late '90s as I was growing up. So you'd worked on a ton of those books that were all sort of, big books and big, and very '90s books like, the New Warriors and like that sort of stuff that was like them trying to do new stuff and create new characters and
Sure.
new teams. What was that? What was that like as a creator being a part of all that?
You know what? I was probably one of the most prolific inkers in the business back in the early '90s.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing 2 or 3 books a month, which is crazy.
Mm.
Think about the amount of you got to turn out. So when I went back to Marvel in '91, I was doing Doctor Strange, and then '92 happened, and that was the boom, right? I was doing the books of the Darkhold. I was doing
Oh,
Nomad.
I love those
I was
books.
doing, yeah, I was doing the Scarlet Witch miniseries. I was doing the Punisher. Um, one of the guys who was my assistant, Mick Gray, went off and had a really good career for himself. He was doing Batman and Robin over Patrick Gleason and just got his own career going. I used to fly him from San Jose, California, to my house, and we would do what we call jungle inking. We would basically sit in a room and just ink our asses off, and then shower, go to bed, wake up, do it again, and we were like barbarians. But I had to get deadlines done. I was
Mm.
doing backups in the Spider-Man annuals. The year in '92, they did those Your Collector, right? You
Mhm.
remember they did those rookie card annuals where they had little
Yep.
plastic bags on the annuals.
Is that the
I
one where they introduced a new villain in each one? They're
I
like,
think yes,
yeah,
yeah.
all right, yeah, yeah. I definitely remember those.
I did the X Factor annual. I did the who's the Deathlock annual. I did the Excalibur annual, and those on top of my regular books,
Wow.
at the time. So I was a busy boy, and I hated to turn work down, but at the same time, if you take it on, you f it up. It's not going to look good well for you. But Mick and I were just the rock stars, and then getting the work all done, and it was a great time, And then of course after Ron Perlman, these guys, these junk bond traders who were trying to up the ante and trying to they were putting 50, 60 books out a month, and then they want to up it to 100, and the readership couldn't handle it.
No.
Metallic covers, glow in the dark covers, and they were doing all these crazy covers, and then I signed 4,000 Spider-Man 375s, which was the 35th anniversary with the Venom metallic cover. I did an 8-page backup story, and the book sold 1.1 million copies.
Mm-hmm.
I signed 4,000 of them for the QVC that year.
Wow.
They were selling for $31.95 with my autograph, and we knew we were shooting ourselves in the foot, because now we're working towards the speculator market and not the readership market.
Yes,
we knew
yeah.
it, but the money was too good to turn down.
Yeah, it's not sustainable, but it's but for a while, that's
It
yeah.
was,
So,
and then
do you attribute that boom to like to the this crazy covers, the variant covers, the all
I
that?
think that played a role, because it was all around that time. But I'll tell you, within 2 years, I could see, because I get royalties. I was getting monthly royalties from Marvel when the books were selling crazy.
Mhm.
I was seeing these big cha-chings, and all of a sudden I did the X Factor annual at the end of late '92, early '93, and I saw a very noticeable difference in the royalty.
Mm.
And I said, what just happened here? And the books, started to fall down. Then they fired a bunch of guys, because they brought a bunch of guys in. When you're doing 50, 60 books and you're trying to double your output, you got to bring in people that are not necessarily ready for the business.
Yeah.
You're bringing in talent that's not really super ready yet, and, I had already dug in. I was dug in already at that point, but all of a sudden now you have a boot. Now you got to go from 75 back to 40 books. You're even taking a dip even further down than what you thought, because people are bailing like crazy, and it just got ugly real fast. And then you're walking around Marvel like you're a guilty survivor, like, people were getting fired and laid off, and it was just it's a rough time,
Yeah.
And it wasn't just Marvel. DC had to do that too, because DC had to keep up with Marvel, and when Marvel was going up the ladder, DC had to do that because they had to compete with shelf space.
Mm.
And then you got, Image Comics, '92, they were big. You had Dark Horse Comics, all those other small, Archie, all those guys had, you only had so much shelf space. So it was a tough time, Meanwhile, just because this guy was a junk bond trader and he was trying to make the most money he could do,
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how like people that were in comics as kids but not anymore. Like you'll run into one of those guys in your life, like, oh, you read comics. Like I got this holofoil copy of Spider-Man #1 by Todd McFarlane. How much money is it worth? And I'm like I got Darkhawk #1. What's this worth? It's like, I don't know, what's saying the cover. It's like $1.95. It's like maybe $5, maybe, until he gets into a movie or something. I don't know. But it's always funny to me. It was a big comic shop in Halifax, which is the major city here in Nova Scotia, and the guy that owns it tells story. Oop, 1 sec, sorry.
Thought your cat was underneath
Hey, I
it.
got my cord tangled here. The guy that owns it always tells stories that people bring in, like a copy of that Spider-Man #1 with the black holofoil cover by Todd McFarlane, and being like, how much is this worth? And then Cal will be like, I don't know, like $1 or something. And the guy will be like, well, that's ridiculous. It should be worth all this. And he'll literally, just for comedic sake, will keep a long box full of them underneath the counter and pull it out and just bring it up and put it on the counter and be like, this is one of 1,000 that are sitting in this box.
Yeah.
So
yeah. The only things I would do super, the low print runs when people like, Ninja Turtles #1,
Oh yes, that's true.
That's the gold, and that's the stuff they put out in the '90s.
Yeah, or like
All
the old books that are like nobody kept when they were kids, because nobody knew that Superman Action Comics #1 would be worth something someday,
Crazy.
When did you make the Sorry, go
Do
ahead.
you? I was going to ask you a question. Do you
Yeah.
have a Holy Grail comic book yourself?
Oof. A lot of them, I'm a big Spider-Man fan. So a lot of them are early Spider-Man appearances. So I have the first appearance of Mysterio, which is probably one of a friend gave it to me as a gift. It's not a great copy of it, but it's Amazing 13.
Oh,
I have like a first Hobgoblin, but that's further down the line, and he's always a character I really enjoyed too. But I feel like probably the Spider-Man 13.
mhm.
It's probably my holy grail for what I got, But as far as what I would like to get, like I have some. I'm pretty lucky. Like I have a copy of the Infinity Gauntlet signed by Jim Starlin,
Right on.
and yeah, and Perez as well. So like I feel like pretty lucky in that way. How about you? Do you have some old one that you never
I
got a hold
bought
of?
I bought Avengers #1 when I was 13 years old for $7. My mom smacked me in the back of the head and said, "What do you spend your money in this crap?" It's a reader copy, but I had it slabbed, and I think it's a 3 or a 5, but it's easily a $3,000 book, right
That's
now.
awesome. A friend of
Yeah.
mine would kill for that. He's trying to collect. I think he got up to 4. He's trying to get the entire run of Avengers, and I think like 1, 2, and 3 are the ones. I mean, 3 is the first Captain America, isn't it? So that would be like
4 is cap. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, maybe it's 5 he's at then, but he's very close to having all of them. So
I got 1 to 150 on Daredevil and Avengers. Those are my two big
wow,
collections. Yeah.
that's
Some guy owed
fantastic.
me $900 for doing an art job for him, and he gave me Daredevil #1. I'm like, all right, I'll take it. At the time, I was like, I could use the cash, but
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
can
but
prove it,
yeah, I feel like you'd know at some point that there's this sort of you can feel that maybe someday this will be. Someone actually just gave me the Elektra getting killed by Bullseye issue.
mm,
Like it's friends of mine who know nothing about comics came to my birthday party and they're like, "We got this for you at this store that sells old stuff," and they goes,
nice.
"We thought you might like it," and they know nothing about what was in it, who died, the cultural relevance of it. And I was like, "Yeah," I was like, "This is actually really good.
That
Like
was beautiful.
you
Yeah.
guys did well on this one,
Right.
That's cool. Well, what did you transition to inking mostly? Because you were kind of in both worlds for a bit, right?
Yeah. Well, the reality was I knew I could work quicker as an anchor, and
Mm-hmm.
I could draw okay, but um, the amount of stuff I actually drew that's been in print is I can count on less than 20 fingers.
Mm-hmm.
I did a Marvel Comics Presents Stingray story in one of the last issues of
Yeah,
CP.
I like Stingray. He's a character that doesn't get a lot of love, but I always
Yeah,
like
no,
the
I
guy.
loved him. I also
Oh.
loved that he had a full mask on, so I had to do facial expressions. Uh,
It's a very practical reason. I like that.
yeah, yeah. And then I did a couple of covers for indie books. I did a Planet of the Apes book. I think it was called Forbidden something of the Planet of the Apes. I
Mm,
did a kind of a James Bond thing where he's got the guns like this with the two girls in a bikini
nice.
hanging up by him. Did that. I did a couple other ones. I can't remember what they were. Crappy books, but it was fun. Uh, right now, Marvel and DC haven't paid the bills since 2012. Really, last thing I did mainstream was the Star Wars stuff for Dark Horse before they lost the license
Right.
to Marvel. But I got to be part of the Star Wars celebration in Winter Park, Florida, or Orange County, Florida, back in 2012, which was really cool.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
Once you work on licensed Star Wars thing, they give you got carte blanche to draw the stuff. So I did a piece called Duel of the Twi'leks. It was Ayala Secura versus Darth Talon. Even
Mhm.
though they're in different universes, I put them fighting each other, and I think I put $35 on them. I made a print run of 250. They sold them on their website before I even got there. They sold 40 copies before I even got there. Got there, they sold another 100 of them. It was nuts.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, because the collector mentality fest stuff was amazing, and there was
Yeah.
75,000 Star Wars fans in one big place.
Yeah.
You know, um, so that was a blessing to do that. And the Blood of the Empire miniseries that I did was important to one of the video games they did.
Mhm.
New
Oh,
Republic
yep.
video game.
Yep.
Yeah. So the characters that I introduced, that I worked with John Jackson Miller, I think was the guy who wrote them. Not
Mhm.
sure. Um, they were in the video game, which is kind of cool too. But
That's
you open up when you do that, and you go to the Star Wars website, and you can see your artwork on the website. You're open to people's wrath if you f it up. Um, So reading that, reading comments and stuff is nerve wracking, right? I can
Yeah.
see why people in the, get, critiqued or critics, get panned or love based on, whatever celebrities, dealing with that stuff.
Yeah, the fandom is interesting. It's comic fandom specifically. I don't know. It's I guess every whatever world you're in. Sport, like I'm not a big sports guy, but like sports fans, whatever, they have their own issues too. But the idea that like there's a lot of people that seem to really hate the thing they claim to love.
Mm.
Like really hate the thing they claim to love. And yeah, it's also like in the advent of the internet, like everybody has a voice now, whether they should or not, I guess. So, and it's a lot of people making comments on things. I do a lot of things in my life. One is I'm a professional wrestler, so I
Oh,
do shows and stuff, and I have a character doing my whole
cool.
thing. So you'll see people comment. They'll come up to you and be like, "Oh, nice match," or "This thing went well," or "That mat move looked cool," and it's like some 400-pound guy that's like covered in Cheeto dust that like is commenting on your match that couldn't physically do anything close to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like I get the fans obviously have a close attachment to things because they love it and they're the ones that you rely on to buy the products that you're making. But they also seems like it often seems like some people can't put a distance. They like because of that they think they own it somehow or some way of
Yeah.
it. And then that just makes them disappointed when it's not the thing they really want it to be, regardless of
Yeah.
what it is.
Sure. You get
So
that.
yeah. Well, what are you working on nowadays? Like what are the new projects
So
doing?
working for a guy named Zach Lynch. He wanted to produce. I met him at a show in Albany, which I'm going up to this weekend. I have another 1 day show in Albany,
Oh,
Albany
awesome.
Comic Con. And I met this guy, I think 2 years ago. He came over to me and said, "Listen, I have a budget. I want to do a comic book. Love to get you involved." And at that point, I was putting teams together, like I could put a whole team together. I called us VII, Visual Inks, Virtual Inks Inc. was a company I
Hmm.
started where I could put you come to me with the idea and the financing, and I'll put the comic book together for you. So I was
Oh,
hiring guys
that's great.
like yeah, I had three colorists, I had two letterers, I had three pencilers, and the guy needed help with the storyline. I had two guys for that, and so I did the guy's book. It was called Vamp Wire. It was a rock and roll vampire. He got bit on his VR device on his arm, and the guy died. And the guy got the power of the vampire, but he was a failed rock and roll guy. Now he's a blue vampire rock and roll guy.
This is
The
great.
money, the checks cashed. It's
Yeah.
the money was okay. I understand when you're an independent, you don't have Marvel and DC money,
No.
so I give them a lower price just
Hmm.
because it keeps me out of working at the local supermarket and that kind
Yeah.
of thing. Even though I do work at the local supermarket 8 hours a week, just because my wife's home all the time, virtual.
Uh,
So one of us need to get out just to keep things lively. Um, so I'm doing another. The guy now has four books out.
oh
He has
wow.
Vampire, Encore, Ronan Riley, and then Venom. Uh, no, it's not Venom. It's Vermin.
Oh yeah.
And he's trying to build a universe. And I'm doing two of the books for the guy. He used to be an intern for Jim Shooter at Defiant when Jim Shooter was at Defiant.
Oh wow. That was a while ago.
Yeah, yeah. He's a young
Yeah.
guy. He's got a lot of energy. He's happy to have me on board because he knows they know he's hoping that my name will help. I'm 20 years away. 10, 12 years away from doing mainstream. But I do know there's a following still, right? So I
Mhm.
still go
Oh
to
yeah.
shows, still sign comic books. One guy came up to me and asked me if I charge for autographs. I said no. Guy takes 150 books and puts them
Thanks.
down in front of me. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
little. So
Do
now
you
I do
do
10.
you, do you find that like as someone because I know some friends that work for Marvel and some other places currently. And do you find that like when you get those guys that come up to you at like a free comic book day or something where you're doing sketches and they're just going to sell this on eBay or something, like
Yeah.
does that bother you on like a deeper level than just, the
You
casual
know,
annoyance of it?
I haven't. I would like to believe that everybody's innocent of that, but
Yeah.
I know the reality. This guy had one of everything. I think they were his books. He
No, well,
wasn't
that's
and he had his son in a cart, and I'm thinking it must have been his collection. Although every time I tell that story, everybody's thinking, "Oh, he's flipping them," Um, I like to believe that was the case, but I
Oh.
don't know. But I got to tell you, one of the editors was standing behind me at DC and said, "That's abuse." And he said, "You shouldn't do that anymore because it takes me away from doing other things."
Yeah, for sure. And time,
So,
like you can't be selling stuff if you're signing 100 books. So
yeah, my head's down like this. Always
yeah,
looking.
yeah. Trying out your hand to cramp up as you're
Yeah,
signing your
yeah.
name 150 times.
So I did what I did started doing is I do 10 books free and then $1 a book after that. So
Oh,
if the guy was coming 150, he's got to give me 140 or reprocess what he wants to do.
yeah, that's smart.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
know guys, bring Deadpool 42, which is a GI Joe parody book. That's a $40 book slab. So I know if I'm signing that. But I'm okay with it. I know guys that say, listen, if you're doing it for CGC, I need $25 an autograph versus $2.
Mhm.
They could lie to you too. You're gonna follow them
Yeah,
around.
that's yeah. How are you gonna figure that out? You have
Yeah,
to spend hours of your day scouring eBay to see that issue that you signed there now, like, and then what? Track them down and get your 20. Like it's just
yeah. No, not me. Yeah,
not worth the battle. Well, that's really cool. I'm happy to hear that you're still keeping
yeah.
keeping
I
up
was
on it.
doing up to 20 shows a year. Up just when COVID hit, I just stopped doing them, and now I'm
Mm,
doing 5 or 6 a year. I could do more, but now I'm starting to tell them I need an appearance fee,
mm.
and that shuts down some of them, and some of them say, "Wait, how much you need?" I go, 500 for the weekend. They go sold, and because if you're in a plane for 3 hours and you're going to
Yeah.
the airport, you lose that 4 hours both ways. You're
Oh
not
yeah.
getting paid. That's eight
Yeah.
hours you don't get back. So I don't think enough comic book guys, as far as I know, they're happy to get a free table. They're
Mm.
like, hey, I got a table, I'm in. I'm like, give me my airfare. I need my hotel, and I need this appearance fee. And I
Yeah.
still signed six jobs this year.
The thing is, the amount of jobs you probably get like doing that, like the ones you probably lose, you probably make up for in what you get from your for your appearance fee from the ones that are willing to pay, right?
True story, yeah.
So,
And
but I
I
feel
will
like
do it.
I
Yeah,
like
I
when artists value themselves better. Like I
say
used to
again.
do. Oh, I just like when artists I appreciate when artists step up and appreciate their own value because as someone who does it myself, like I remember when I was doing art prints and stuff at conventions, I would just like they were like $5 each, and then like someone eventually just said like these are really nice, you should charge 10, or you should charge more than this, and this is years ago. So it's like because you just think well 5 seems like a lot for this, but eventually you double your money and then you feel like you have some value as well to what you're putting out in the world. So
Yeah, I mean, the reality is it takes you what, 0.5 seconds,
yeah.
to autograph something, and how much are you going to make on it? I was just at the show in Carlisle, Pennsylvania this past
Mhm.
weekend, and they brought some. I don't know if you remember these guys, 1970s Plastic Man Action Hour.
No, I don't think I do.
Shazam, Captain Mark. Shazam was a TV show, live
Oh
action
yeah,
TV.
yeah, I remember that.
That guy, his name is Jackson Bostwick.
Hmm.
And then the guy who played Spider-Man, not the original Spider-Man, but he was another guy. His name is Scott Leva,
Hmm.
Leva. He played Spider-Man, and you see him in some of the pictures. And the Plastic Man is a little creepy because he had this weird little arm go out and wrap around things and all. But all three of them went to the show this weekend, and Ron Friends and myself did the
Oh, I do
VIP.
remember the live action Plastic Man thing, right?
Yes,
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah, 100%. I remember seeing something about that recently because I didn't know there was a live action Plastic Man show in the 70s. Like that was
he
crazy.
would introduce the cartoon.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, it was cheesy as all get out.
Yeah.
But all three of them were on the same. We were in like Murderers Row there, the three of them, two artists, and we were signing the VIP pieces. So the reason I brought it up is talking about autographs. The guy who played Shazam was charging $40 an autograph. And
Wow.
this guy was popular 50 years ago for one season, and he's
Yeah.
charging $40.
Wow.
Meanwhile, me and Ron Friends are doing it for free.
Yeah.
The Spider-Man's for free, and then you go free, 20, 40, because Plastic Man was getting 20, and I just thought this is awful.
Yeah. That's brutal.
Yeah,
Are,
I
are
don't know.
you friends with Ron Friends?
Uh, I met Ron at a Pittsburgh Comic Con 20 years ago, and I liked the guy. He had good personality. We drove back and forth to the show every day. We're best buddies now.
No, awesome.
Yeah, he's a good dude, man. I hooked him up with one of the covers for Blue Shack, so he'll be
Nice.
doing one of the covers. And yeah, he's a great dude. He's a great dude.
I'm a huge fan of his work, so
Yeah,
that
he
that's
was
cool.
blowing out full body convention sketches
Mm.
like he did 7 in, I don't know, 3 hours, and they were gorgeous, you know. And
Yeah.
then the guy deserves everything he gets. He's wonderful.
That is there's a real skill to that too, is to create like sort of, I have a few on my wall where you can see. There's a Mysterio up there by Nick Bradshaw from
Yeah, he's a
and
stud. Oh,
yeah,
he's a Canadian boy.
he lives in New Brunswick, which and
Oh yeah, yeah.
he's kind of a
He's
friend,
a
I
good,
guess.
he's a good dude. Yeah, I like him.
Yeah, he runs a convention called East Coast Well, he doesn't run it, but he's part of or connected to this East Coast Comic Expo they host in Moncton,
Oh, right on.
which is in New Brunswick, every the next province over from us.
Okay.
That they do once a year in the summer, and it's you should chat with them sometime, or is there someone from the team about it? It'd be cool to have
Yeah,
you up
no,
there.
we met at we sat next to each other at a show in it was the Empire State Comic Con, I don't know, a few years ago, and
Mhm.
yeah, I like him and his wife are good peeps. You know,
Danica, yeah, they're great. Yeah.
Danica,
But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
just going to like you were talking about just seeing these guys at cons. Like I went to the Montreal Comic Con many, many years ago just as a fan before I even started doing art and selling it myself. And I just had a little indie comic I'd made. Um, it was called Humbug, and it was uh, like a steampunk, like Ebenezer Scrooge Christmas Carol story, but he becomes like a steampunk hero and then goes off fights monsters and stuff.
Uh,
Coincidentally enough, another version of that came out a few years later. So there's a part of me in the back of my conspiracy laden brain that's like somebody must have got a copy of that and stole it
right.
because like a bigger company did it with someone. I wouldn't say it's someone
Yeah,
that I recognized, but it definitely was almost the exact same idea.
that's funny.
But I had given it to several people like and that had come back and given me nice feedback or like but I stopped and got some sketches and stuff from people that I respected and like Ty Templeton. Watching him do
Sure.
sketches were so cool. Also Canadian, but like Herb Trimpe was there, and I got like a really cool. Got him to sign like his last issue, Incredible Hulk, and yeah, it's a lot of cool like the ability to really like get a good, succinct, cool sketch out. It's a real sort of factory type mentality. You got to get it.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I got
it's
to ink Herb on a. I'm a fan too, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I got to ink his Thor annual one year, which was
Oh wow. Yeah, he was a really sweet man. I really like
yeah,
talking with
yeah.
him. And
It was
I have a sketch from Darwin Cook too, which of his Spider-Man.
nice.
And he was always a really sweet guy. So
I like him too. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
he
know
was
pretty much all of them.
yeah, yeah. Darwin, quite a few creators have moved out here over the years. I don't know, like COVID I think helped. Some were already here, but
Mm,
like but because I think COVID like showed everyone that you kind of like, especially comic artists, you can do it anywhere. So like people come out here for conventions and be like, it's way cheaper to live in the East Coast than it is to,
right.
live in Toronto or any of the major cities. So
Yeah, you
Darwin,
make New York money.
yeah, Darwin was out here for quite a while before he passed away. And yeah, so he would be like at the local comic shops in Halifax every time there's some event, he would be there doing
Yeah,
sketches and stuff. And I got to hang out with him a little bit. Dave Sim was doing a big tour, kind of like a last tour
yeah.
for
Never
Cerebus.
met. Yeah,
No, yeah, interesting guy too. But and I'd met him at some of that stuff. Yeah. So yeah, it was cool. But you're right. Like it must be nice after going through your career and up to this point is to kind of spend a lot of your time now getting to talk to the fandom directly in these sort of instances.
yeah. It's a lonely business being at home, drawing. So the only
Yeah.
time you ever got out to do these things is when you were at a con, and then you get the vibe from the people direct. Um, I I'm a pretty nice guy, when it come down to meeting people at these shows. So you see two guys walk by you, and they go, "Oh, he's one of the nicest guys in the comic business," and it's not like I'm working at it. It's just
Mm.
that I clean up dog shit in the backyard like everybody else.
Mhm.
It brings you. It doesn't doesn't need a big head to do that. So it's just something that I was fortunate that I got lucky at the right time. Joe Orlando wasn't there. I met this one, and then I had a 20-something year career. Even though it'll be 40 years next year that I
Wow.
started at Marvel, April of 1985.
Wow.
40 years, yeah.
Wow.
And I got to be
That's
honest with you, there was a lot of years I didn't make a lot of bank,
mm.
but those early 90 years where you made most of it, and then I was doing Batman for DC at one point, and Detective actually, which I was doing 769. But if you think about it, that's the original Detective book.
Yeah.
769, you go back as 1938 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I did 6 issues of Detective, and I'm like, this is awesome. And this is already after I had a big career over Steve Lieber, from a guy who did Black and White, I think was his thing.
Yep.
Yeah, right. And then he did the one up in Antarctica, which they made a movie out of.
Oh, Whiteout?
Whiteout. Yeah, Whiteout.
Wasn't Steve Lieber? What was that guy? Was it Rucka? No. Who did Whiteout?
Greg Rucka wrote it.
Yeah. Right. Yes, that's right.
But Jim Lee went on to do Batman, and then they booed the whole creative team on Detective. And this was a rough time of my life because I not only lost Batman, my father passed away, and I moved into a house upstate New York. I left my wife with a 55-foot U-Haul truck while I was doing a show in Chicago, and I'm like, this is nuts. But this is what, life's a journey, what you got to do,
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks. I'm a big fan of the work. Just hearing you walk through some of the old books that bring me back. Dark Hole was one of those ones I always felt as a kid, like that was like my book because no one else I knew was reading it, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
But like I grew up in a very small area of rural Nova Scotia, so that there was maybe 10 people buying comics in my town. So, it's like but the idea that like, it's nice to be able to get a chance to chat with someone that sort of created these things that make these fond memories for you as a kid. So
yeah, man, thank you for that. Yeah.
Oh, and thanks again for being in the show, Mark. It's been awesome chatting with you.
Oh, I appreciate your time. You're a good man. Let me know when you're going to do the thing, and I'll share it with all my
Absolutely. I'll send you the link when it's up.
My peeps.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Have a great day.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah. Bye.
Big thanks to Mark McKenna for being on the show. That was a great conversation. I had a really good time just getting all those stories, learning about his life, about some of the other aspects of studio comic system and what people don't often get. I love when people talk about the old days in that system and what some of those characters were like and how some of the things were done, because I truly do believe it, as I said to Mark in the interview, that I find it so interesting, the business side of an artistic endeavor and how those two worlds, which don't seem like, they seem like oil and water to me, but somehow they mix, and how that happens and the personalities that make it happen is always interesting to me. Those industry books about some of the different creators is so cool, and getting firsthand account on it from Mark was a blast, and just a really cool conversation. Like I really like when it really clicks with a guest and we chat a lot. That was me snapping when it clicks with a guest and we kind of seem to connect and we have a great little conversation, and that was certainly what we had today. So thank you for tuning in. Be sure to tune in 1 week's time for our next episode, but in the meantime, stay safe, have fun, and go read some comics. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.